The rain hit the asphalt like a drum line, steady, relentless, echoing through the quiet streets of Millers Creek, Oregon. It was just past 10:40 p.m. The town was asleep, cloaked in fog and shadow. Inside the police precinct, Officer Maria Daniels sipped her lukewarm coffee and stared blankly at her monitor. A night shift was usually uneventful. Most nights, her biggest concern was making sure the vending machine didn't eat her last dollar dot. Then came the sound. A strange, urgent scratching. At the front door dot at first, she thought it was the wind playing tricks. But then came a low, guttural whine so human in its pain, it made her heart skip. She stood, hand instinctively brushing the grip of her sidearm, and approached the glass doors. The rain distorted the figure outside, but as she leaned closer, her breath caught in her throat. A German shepherd, soaked, bleeding, trembling, its right hind leg dragged uselessly behind it, leaving a trail of dark crimson across the wet concrete. Clenched tightly in its mouth was an old, torn backpack caked with dirt and streaked with something darker. Maria yanked open the door. "Hey, easy, you're okay," she said, crouching low. The dog didn't growl. It didn't retreat. It stepped forward, slow and deliberate, then collapsed at her boots with a heavy thud. Even then, it didn't let go of the backpack. Its eyes clouded, but focused locked with hers. There was pain in them. But there was also urgency. Something deeper. Like it wasn't just injured, it was trying to say something. Within moments, backup arrived. Officers Hall and Myers rushed out with towels and gear, confusion on their faces. "What the hell is this?" Myers muttered. "Where'd it come from?" "Doesn't have a collar. No tag," Hall added. Maria knelt beside the animal. "It didn't just wander here. Look at this thing." She gently reached for the backpack. "It brought us something." The dog released its grip, but didn't stop staring, as though watching, waiting to see what they'd do next. Inside the station, they laid the dog on a stretcher and radioed for the local emergency vet. Maria, her hands shaking, unzipped the backpack, and everything changed. Inside was a blood-stained child stuffed bunny, a folded topographic map with torn edges and dried dirt, a cracked police radio, a foil-wrapped object about the size of a deck of cards, and at the very bottom, a photo creased and faded dot. It showed a man in uniform kneeling beside a little girl, no older than 7. Between them sat the very same German shepherd, healthy and proud, tongue out and tail mid-wag. On the back of the photo were 2 words in smudged ink. "Finder." Maria's stomach dropped. Oh my God. One by one, the officers gathered around. The vet arrived, murmuring a quiet curse under her breath as she examined the wounds. "This dog's been shot. Recently. Multiple injuries. Burn marks too. But he's not giving up. Whoever trained him. He's not just a pet. He's a soldier." Maria stared at the photo again. The man looked familiar. But it was the girl that got her. Something in her eyes. Something that begged to be remembered. She looked back at the dog. He hadn't just stumbled in off the street. He had come for help, bleeding, limping, half dead, but determined. The precinct had no idea yet, but they weren't just looking at a hurt dog. They were standing at the start of a story that would unravel corruption, awaken a forgotten tragedy, and lead to a truth buried deep in the forest. And it had all started with a dog who refused to let go of a backpack. Asterisk, the rain hadn't stopped by the time the vet wheeled the injured K9 into the back room of the precinct. Maria Daniels stood silently over the backpack's contents, her heart pounding in her ears. Around her, officers hovered silent, tense none, knowing exactly what they were looking at. But every one of them could feel it in their gut. This wasn't just evidence. It was a cry for help. The photo, though faded and bent, still captured something haunting. The man's smile was tired, protective. The girl's hand clutched the dog's, ear mid-laugh. And the dog, now bleeding in their station, had once looked so full of life. Strong, loyal. But it was the back of the photo, those two words, "Find her," that made the room feel colder. "Check the drive," Maria said. Suddenly, "The what?" Officer Myers asked Dot. She pointed to the foil-wrapped object from the backpack. "I think that's a flash drive." Hall peeled back the wrapping carefully and revealed a scratched, weather-beaten USB. Maria handed it off to dispatch, and within minutes their IT tech, Wes, was trying to access its contents on a secure laptop. Dot. As he worked, Maria turned to the map. Topographic, covered in smeared ink and dried blood. There were markings and X over a remote area of forest, a series of numbers scribbled near the bottom corner, and one phrase circled 3 times in red: Lower Ridge Cavern access entry only. Something clicked in Maria's memory. This area, it's near Cascade Pass, about 60 miles northeast. Myers leaned in. Didn't that area get shut down last year? That botched operation. What was it called? Operation Timberfall. Someone muttered. Dot. The name landed like a punch in the room. Timberfall had been one of the state's most classified narcotics. Raids meant to root out a drug pipeline running through the national forest. The official report said the team had gone dark, ambushed by hostile elements. No survivors. No bodies. Sergeant Luke Mercer had led it. Dot. And Mercer had a daughter. Maria looked down at the photo again. She whispered, "It's them." In that moment, Wes looked up from his laptop. "I got something." He hit a key, and grainy body cam footage filled the screen. It was dark, static-laced. A man's voice, calm but strained, echoed faintly. "Been compromised. Repeat. Friendly units not responding. I've got Emily secured. Going off-grid. Valor knows the way." Gunshots, screams. Then the screen cut to black. The room fell silent again. "Valor," Maria murmured. She turned toward the vet who was tending to the dog's leg. "That's his name, isn't it?" The vet nodded. "He responds to it. Whines when we say Emily. Tried to stand when we showed him the photo. He's not ready to quit. He's been carrying this," Maria whispered, looking at the backpack, "for months. Maybe longer." Myers blinked. "You're saying this dog crossed 50-plus miles, bleeding and alone, to bring us this?" Maria looked at the blood-streaked map again. "No, I'm saying he's been trying to lead us somewhere." One of the younger deputies leaned against the wall, pale, but that raid was a year ago. Mercer was declared dead. The girl was never found. Maria's jaw tightened. What if that was the point? What if they wanted it buried? Why? Myers asked. Wes looked up again. "There's more on the drive. Documents, not just footage. Logs. Communications between the raid team and someone outside protocol. Could be internal corruption." Maria turned to the dog. Valor, bandaged, sedated, but still fighting to stay. Awake, he'd carried the truth in his teeth, alone and wounded, because he had no one else. No backup. No voice, just loyalty and memory. And now they knew. The raid wasn't just a failure. It was a cover-up. And the dog that refused to die had just blown the whole thing wide open. The following morning brought no sunshine, just more rain, gray skies, and the weight of everything they'd learned. Maria Daniels sat in the precinct's small break room, staring at the flash drive's decrypted documents. They weren't just logs. They were reports, audio files, even internal memos, many redacted. But one thing was clear. Sergeant Luke Mercer hadn't gone rogue. He had been betrayed. Quiet knock on the door snapped her out of it. Officer Hall stepped in, followed by a man in civilian clothes, older, gray-haired, but with the unmistakable posture of a lifelong cop. "Maria," Hall said, This is Detective Jim Raleigh. Retired narcotics. Says he knew Mercer. Raleigh extended a hand. I heard about the dog. Saw the footage. That was Valor. No doubt in my mind. Maria shook his hand, cautious but curious. How did you know them? I trained Luke. Ran narcotics for 20 years. Helped pair him with Valor when he joined the K9 program. They were the best team we had, he said, voice cracking slightly. But something changed after Emily was born. He got quieter, protective, said the department was getting too political. Maria raised an eyebrow. Political how? Raleigh hesitated. Some of our operations weren't just about drugs. We started finding things cash stashes, off-the-book deals. When Timberfall was greenlit, Luke told me it didn't smell right. He said someone high up was pushing it too hard. Too fast. He was going to back out, but then Emily vanished. During the raid? No, the night before. Maria's eyes narrowed. He brought her with him? He didn't trust anyone else to protect her. Said if something went south, Valor would know what to do. And looks like he did. Outside the room, Valor stirred weakly on his blanket. The vet had administered fluids and antibiotics, but he still refused to rest, his head lifting every time someone mentioned Emily's name. Raleigh stared through the window at the dog. That animal would have died for that girl? For Luke. Hell, he nearly did. Maria felt a chill. So if Mercer knew the raid was a setup, why go at all? Raleigh's jaw clenched. Because they gave him a choice. Either he let it, or someone else would. And they'd never let Emily out of it alive. The pieces clicked together like rusted cogs. Mercer had walked into Timberfall, knowing it might kill him. But he'd left to trail his dog, the backpack, the map, and the flash. Drive all entrusted to Valor. One last chance to get the truth out. Maria stood. We need to go to that location, the one marked on the map. You think Emily's still out there? Hall asked. Maria didn't hesitate. I think if she's not, we'll find out why. As they prepped for departure, Valor pushed himself up slowly, trembling but determined. The vet tried to ease him back down, but he growled softly, his eyes locked on Maria. He wasn't staying behind Dot, so they outfitted him with a protective vest, wrapped his leg, and fitted a GPS tracker. Where? You going, old man? Hall asked gently. But Valor was already heading for the door. Maria followed, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with something else. Resolve. If Mercer had risked his life to keep the truth alive, they weren't going to let it die in a drawer. And if Emily was still out there, this dog bruised and battered, was their only chance of finding her. As the team loaded into their vehicles and Valor hopped into the back of Maria's SUV, no one said a word, because sometimes silence says everything. By noon, the convoy had left the edges of Miller's Creek and was winding deeper into the wild. The forest swallowed the road until even the radio signal began to crackle and fail. Towering pines stood like silent guardians, and every bend in the trail felt like a step back in time. Maria drove point, with Valor curled in the back seat. His breathing still labored, but his eyes alert. His nose twitched constantly, every now and then letting out a low huff, like he was remembering something, checking against old sense and instincts. Forged through training and trauma. They reached the end of the drivable path by mid-afternoon. What lay ahead was wilderness untouched, overgrown, and dangerous. You sure about this? Hall asked, tightening the straps on his backpack. No, Maria said, but he is. She looked at Valor. The dog was already out of the car, limping forward through the brush with slow, determined steps. The agents followed without question. They trekked for miles, the terrain growing steeper and colder with every hour. The map clutched in Maria's vest pocket was more of a general guide than a reliable chart. Trees had fallen. Trails had disappeared. But Valor didn't stop. Every time he faltered, he'd take a breath, glance back at Maria like he was asking for one more chance, and then press forward. By dusk, they reached a clearing, bordered by thick underbrush and rocks. Maria pulled the map from her vest and compared it to the terrain. "This is it. The X," she said. Or it was. But the only thing in sight was a rock slide. Jagged boulders blocked a natural drop in the land, with moss and vines grown thick over it. Hall frowned. "This can't be it. It's just debris." Valor suddenly lunged forward, growling. He began pawing frantically at the rocks, his claws scraping against the stone as he whined and dug. "He's found something," Maria said. "Heart THUDDING." Hall joined her, prying away loose stones. Soon they uncovered an edge metal rusted and flat, a buried hatch. Maria knelt and cleared more away, revealing a circular latch. She looked at Hall. "Help me." With effort, they turned the corroded wheel until it gave a rusty snap and lifted. Cold air blasted upward, carrying the smell of mildew, metal, and something else, decay. They descended the ladder into pitch blackness, guided by flashlights. The space below was cramped and cold, the walls lined with shelves of canned food, medical kits, and survival tools. Blankets were folded in the corner. Children's books lay scattered on the floor. Maria's chest tightened. There were signs of life everywhere. And signs that someone had been here recently. A crayon drawing taped to the wall showed a little girl holding hands with a dog. In shaky lettering, it read, "Me and Valor. Daddy says stay safe." Maria felt her eyes sting. Hall stepped deeper inside and found a dented thermos. It was warm. She was here, maybe within the last 24 hours. On a small metal cot, Maria found something that stopped her heart cold. A torn piece of cloth, the sleeve of a jacket, with a name stitched inside in fading pink thread. "Emily Mercer. She's alive," Maria whispered. "She has to be." Just then, Valor let out a low bark from above. They scrambled up the ladder. Valor stood near the tree line, growling at the darkness. His ears were perked, nose flaring. "She's not in there," Hall said. "She's still out here somewhere." Maria turned to her team. "We're not going back until we find her." They grabbed their gear, and Valor, bruised, stitched, and unstoppable, led the way. The forest grew eerily quiet as night fell. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Maria adjusted her flashlight and followed closely behind Valor, who moved with more urgency now. His injured leg trembled, but he didn't stop every few steps. He would sniff the ground, glance back at Maria, and push forward into the shadows like he was chasing the past itself. Hall and 2 other officers flanked wide, checking for any signs of Emily footprints, hair, discarded wrappers, anything. To prove she'd been there, Maria kept replaying the drawings on the bunker walls in her mind. The girl hadn't just survived, she had clung to hope. She had believed that someone was coming. That someone was Valor. Suddenly, Valor stopped dead in his tracks. His ears perked, nose twitching furiously. He let out a short, sharp bark. Maria rushed to his side. They were near a fallen tree, covered in moss, and beneath it, something glinted under her flashlight beam. She crouched and pulled out a child's pink shoelace, frayed, dirty, but intact. "Emily," she breathed. "Over here," Hall called from a few feet ahead. He pointed to a nearby patch of damp earth, where small, bare footprints led toward a narrow path veering off the main trail. They were fresh. Maria didn't hesitate. "Let's go." They moved fast now, ducking under branches and dodging bramble. The path twisted and narrowed, opening into a small, rocky clearing that sloped down into a crevice. Tucked into the edge of it was a narrow cave mouth. Hidden behind a curtain of vines, Valor charged toward it, barking twice louder now. With urgency, Maria raised her hand, signaling silence. She stepped toward the cave, heart pounding in her ears, when something else caught her attention. A metal box wedged between the rocks just outside the cave entrance. She pried it free. It was rusted and heavy, locked with a simple latch. Inside, carefully wrapped in layers of plastic and cloth, were several files marked Timberfall, Classified Level 3. Taped to the top was a folded piece of paper, written in neat, all-caps lettering. "If I don't make it out, this tells the truth. Trust Valor. Protect Emily." Maria's hands shook. Mercer planted this. He knew they'd try to erase everything. The files inside revealed what they had feared. Timberfall hadn't been a mission gone wrong. It had been sabotage. Sergeant Mercer's unit had uncovered an internal trafficking ring tied to several high-ranking officials. When Mercer refused to stay quiet, his raid team was split and redirected into an ambush. They were never meant to come back, and Emily, she had become leverage. Maria's voice cracked. He sacrificed everything to keep her safe. She stared at the cave entrance, dark, narrow, and silent. Then Valor let out a soft whine, stepped forward, and began to crawl inside. Maria followed. The cave was narrow, damp, and cold. After 10 feet of crawling, it opened into a small hollow. There, lying beneath a pile of bundled blankets and holding the stuffed bunny from the backpack, was Emily Mercer. She was thinner than the photo, pale and trembling, but alive. Her eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the light. When she saw Valor, her lips quivered. "V? Valor?" The dog crawled toward her and licked her hand gently. Emily burst into quiet sobs and whispered, "He came back. I knew he would." Maria's breath caught. Tears filled her eyes. "We've got her," she radioed, voice breaking. "We've got Emily Mercer alive." As the team worked quickly to get Emily food, water, and warmth, Maria pulled Valor close and whispered, "You did it, boy. You kept your promise." Outside, the forest began to stir with morning wind, but the storm had just begun. Because now they had the truth, and someone was going to pay for what they did to Emily, to Mercer, and to the dog who never gave up. By the time the chopper lifted off the forest clearing with Emily bundled safely inside, the sun had just started to rise. The sky glowed with that cold, golden light only mountain mornings could bring. Maria watched from below, her hand resting on Valor's neck as the rotors thundered overhead. "She's safe now," Hall said, stepping beside her. Maria didn't take her eyes off the sky. "Yeah? But she's not the only one who needs justice." Back at the precinct, Maria and her team gathered around the files found near the cave. Each document was more damning than the last. Names, dates, signed authorizations for Timberfall. It bypassed standard review protocols. Some signatures were familiar. One of them belonged to Deputy Commissioner Alan Creed, a respected state official and former commander of the Narcotics Division. "He ordered the mission," Hall said. His face pale. "Said it was to intercept cartel runners. But Mercer and his team weren't ambushed by traffickers," Maria finished. "They were sent into a trap. Creed used his authority to silence whistleblowers. Mercer found evidence linking Creed to missing narcotics and laundered money from prior busts. He tried to report it, and suddenly, Timberfall was greenlit." Wes, the IT tech, looked up from his computer. "And there's more. Audio logs. Mercer had recordings, emails, calls. He was building a case. The flash drive was part of it, but he hid the real files near Emily, knowing she was the only one they'd never dare to search for. Until they gave up looking for her," Hall said. Maria's stomach turned. "Or until they assumed she died in the woods." The full scope of the cover-up was horrifying. Creed had manipulated multiple operations, falsified after-action reports, and quietly removed those who got too close. Mercer had figured it out and paid the price. But thanks to Valor, the truth was now in the open. They submitted the files to the FBI's Internal Affairs Division, bypassing the local chain of command. Within hours, the Bureau sent agents to take over the case. Creed, meanwhile, was still making public appearances, completely unaware that the walls were closing in. But there was one more thing. Emily's safe now, Maria said. But Creed doesn't know that, which means we have an advantage. The Bureau agreed to keep Emily's recovery secret until Creed could be formally arrested. They needed airtight proof and no warning. But Valor had other plans. That night, as Maria sat reviewing files alone, Valor nudged her hand. He whined softly and walked to the door. You want something? He walked in circles, then stared at the photo of Mercer and Emily on the desk. Maria's chest tightened. You want to finish it. The next morning, the team set up a sting. Creed was scheduled to attend a closed-door meeting with state officials at the Capitol building under the guise of discussing law enforcement budget reform. In reality, it was his final chance to protect his influence. Maria, in plain clothes, waited near the service entrance with FBI backup. Inside, Creed smiled and shook hands, never suspecting what was coming. Then, a quiet voice broke the calm. Left me in the woods. Everyone turned. Standing beside Agent Hall was Emily, her small hand resting on Valor's head. The room froze. Creed's face drained of color. Before he could speak, the agent stepped in. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and second-degree murder, one said. Creed tried to back away. You can't prove. We can, Maria said, stepping forward, holding the folder. Your signature's on every order. And Mercer recorded your calls. Creed's eyes landed on Valor, scarred, silent, unblinking. The dog took one step forward and growled low. It was quiet, but it echoed through the hall. For a moment, Creed looked like he might cry. The story broke nationwide in less than 24 hours. Hero K9 uncovers government conspiracy. Missing girl found after a year in wilderness. Dog brings down corrupt commander in Oregon State raid scandal. But the headline that gripped everyone's heart came from a small independent outlet. She waited for him, and he came. Emily Mercer sat under soft studio lights, legs tucked under her on the chair, her thin arms gently resting around Valor's neck. He stayed seated beside her the entire time, eyes alert, breathing slow. Bandages still wrapped his back leg, and gray had started to show in his muzzle. But he was proud, watchful, just as he had been in the forest. Across from her sat the journalist, his voice gentle. Emily, how did you survive so long, all alone? Emily blinked, her voice small but steady. I wasn't alone. Daddy left me the cave, the food. He said it was safe. He told Valor to come back when it was time. You weren't afraid? She nodded slowly. I was, but I remembered what Daddy said. That Valor always keeps his promise. The journalist leaned forward. What was the hardest part? Emily was quiet for a long time. Then she said, when it snowed. And I didn't know if Valor was still alive. I thought maybe they got him too. She looked at the camera, then straight into the lens, and through it, the hearts of millions. But he came. Just like Daddy said. Across the country, people watched and wept. Some with daughters of their own. Some with dogs curled at their feet. The image of a little girl starved, scarred, but brave, and her battered dog, who refused to quit, struck something primal in everyone. The broadcast ended, with footage of Emily placing her hand on Valor's head and whispering, You saved me. And the moment he gently licked her cheek, the world collectively fell in love with him. Back at the precinct, Maria Daniels stared at the screen with silent awe. She had seen dozens of cases in her time, but none like this. She'd never believed one dog could carry that much hope in his heart, or that a child could survive on the strength of a promise. A knock at her office door pulled her from the screen. It was Hall, holding a folder. "They're doing it," he said. "The governor. They're giving Valor the highest K-9 medal in state history. Full ceremony. Public." Maria smiled faintly. "He deserves a hell of a lot more than a medal." "Also," Hall hesitated, then handed her a printed form. "The FBI asked if we'd assign someone as Emily's protective liaison until her extended family from Montana can finalize guardianship." Maria looked up. "Me?" He shrugged. "You're the only one she lets near her besides the dog." Maria sat back slowly. It wasn't just a duty. It felt like a calling. "She needs stability," Hall said. "Normalcy. Maybe some laughter. And people who won't treat her like a headline." Maria folded the paper in half. "I'll do it." That weekend, at the state capitol, the crowd gathered beneath waving flags. Veterans stood at attention. Police officers lined the steps. And at the top, next to a polished podium, stood Emily dressed in a white sweater and pink shoes. Holding Valor's leash dot as the governor stepped forward with the medal in hand, he addressed the crowd. "There are heroes with badges, heroes in uniform. But today, we honor a hero who wore not only courage and scars. A K-9 who survived the impossible, carried the truth on his back, and led us all to justice." Cheers erupted as the medal was gently placed around Valor's neck. He didn't react much, but when Emily knelt and whispered something in his ear, he wagged his tail once. And that was enough. Weeks had passed since the ceremony. The spotlight had dimmed, the headlines faded from the front page, and the state began its long process of reckoning. Trials were scheduled. Resignations poured in. Investigations expanded beyond Oregon as new evidence came to light, evidence Valor had carried in a torn backpack through miles of forest. But in a quiet neighborhood outside Millers Creek, none of that mattered to Emily Mercer. Here, the world had slowed down. She sat on the porch of Maria Daniels' home, wrapped in a blanket, sipping hot cocoa. Her eyes no longer darted at every sound. Her hands didn't shake when the wind rattled the trees. She laughed now softly, sometimes out loud, especially when Valor rolled over and demanded belly rubs. Maria stepped outside and sat beside her. "School sent a welcome packet," she said, holding up a bright yellow folder. Emily tilted her head. "Are there dogs at this school?" Maria chuckled. "Only if you count the janitor's grumpy bulldog." Emily smirked. "He sounds like Hall. I'll make sure Hall hears that." The two sat in silence for a moment, watching the sunset bleed orange and purple across the sky. Valor lay at Emily's feet, his breathing slow, content. "You think my dad knew it would work?" Emily asked softly. Maria glanced at her. "I think he believed in you. And in Valor, he trusted both of you to survive." Emily looked down at her cocoa. "He told me Valor would come. I thought I was just pretending. But then he really did. He really came." Maria reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "He didn't stop, not even when he was bleeding. Not even when everyone else gave up." Emily was quiet for a long time. "Can he stay with me forever?" Maria hesitated. Valor had been formally adopted by the state, recognized as a retired service animal with full honors. But there was no question where he belonged. "I think," Maria said, "he already decided that a long time ago." That winter, a statue was unveiled outside the Oregon State Police Academy. It showed a bronze version of Valor back straight, eyes forward, a backpack clutched in his jaws. Below him were the words, "Loyalty, courage, truth." And etched into the stone beside it, dedicated to K-9 valor and Sergeant Luke Mercer, whose sacrifice saved lives and revealed the truth. Maria stood beside Emily at the unveiling. Crowds had gathered. Reporters had returned. But this time, it wasn't about scandal or politics. It was about honoring something pure, something unbreakable. Valor didn't seem to notice the cameras. His nose was buried in the scarf around Emily's neck, and his tail thumped against her boot's dot as the ceremony closed. Emily stepped to the mic. She clutched a piece of paper in her hand, but when she spoke, she didn't read from it. My dad told me that sometimes people will try to hide the truth because it scares them. But if someone's brave enough to keep going, even a dog, the truth finds a way. She looked down at Valor, then back at the crowd. I survived because of him. I'm here because of him. And I hope you all remember that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they just don't stop loving you. The crowd stood in silence. Some wept openly. Others saluted. Maria stood behind her, tears stinging her eyes. She had seen tragedy before. Pain, injustice, but never redemption like this. That night, back home, Emily crawled into bed with Valor already curled at the foot. She pulled the blanket up, kissed his ear, and whispered, "You're not going anywhere. Ever again." Valor didn't move, but his tail tapped twice against the mattress. And in that moment, in a world that had tried to bury them both, they slept finally safe, finally. Whole. Together. Forever.